A millionaire CEO saw a little girl crying at his wife's grave. When he asked why, her answer left him in tears. Before the story begins, please tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Fairview Memorial Park was nearly empty that afternoon. The winter sky hung low and colorless, and the December wind whispered through bare branches like a secret too cold to speak aloud. Alexander West stood motionless in front of a polished granite headstone, the sharp cut of his tailored coat flapping gently at his knees. He held a single white rose. Megan West, beloved wife, 1985 to 2020. Love remains, even when we don't. He knelt slowly, placing the flower at the base, brushing fallen pine needles from her name like it still mattered to keep her clean, remembered, perfect. 3 years, and yet it still hadn't stopped hurting. He straightened up, rubbing the back of his neck with gloved fingers. The man who built Westlink Technologies from a dorm room had conquered boardrooms, competitors, and continents. But grief had no acquisition strategy. It just sat there, unblinking. And then, a sound. Software fragile. A sob. Alex blinked, turning slightly. Behind the headstone, where the slope dipped toward a rusted bench under an old birch tree, he saw movement. A child, a little girl, maybe 6, hunched low to the ground. Her hair was blonde and tangled, falling over her face. She wore a coat far too big for her, sleeves dragging in the dirt, and hugged a threadbare stuffed fox to her chest like a lifeline. Her shoes were soaked through, her cheeks flushed with cold. Alex took a step forward. "Hey, sweetheart, are you all right?" The girl lifted her head slowly, eyes red-rimmed and glassy. She didn't flinch, but her voice came out as a breath, barely more than a whisper. "Daddy?" He froze. Not figuratively, his entire body locked in place. His chest constricted, breath stuck mid-inhale. "What?" "Daddy," she repeated, softer now. "She said you'd come find me." The world dropped away. Alex stumbled slightly and took a knee eye level with her. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice oddly tight. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Mia." His throat tightened. He swallowed. "And your mother?" She hugged the fox tighter. "Meg." But she said, not to say it too loud. He doesn't like it. Alex's heart thundered. Meg, no one had called Megan that except her college friends. Or him. A private nickname from a different life. A life that, apparently, had pieces still walking the earth. Before he could ask more, a new voice cut through the cemetery. "There you are!" A man in a charcoal gray wool coat and leather gloves approached briskly, his polished shoes crunching on frost-bitten leaves. He was tall, neatly groomed, with wire-rimmed glasses and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm so sorry," the man said, nodding politely to Alex. "She's a wanderer, part of her grief process. I'm her foster guardian." Mia shrank behind the headstone. "She was here alone," Alex said quietly. "Yes, well, she tends to sneak out during group therapy time." The man gave a sheepish chuckle. "Hard to keep tabs on kids who know how to hide." He reached out a hand to Mia. She didn't move. "Come now, Mia," he said gently. But something about the way he said it made Alex bristle. Too smooth, too rehearsed. "It's time to go." She looked at the man, then turned her gaze up to Alex, those same eyes Megan once had. Wide, vulnerable, pleading without words. Alex took a step forward. "She said her mother's name was Meg." The man paused, just for a second. Barely enough to notice, but Alex did. "Oh, she must mean Maggie, short for Margaret. We had a resident by that name," the man said quickly, Slipped through the cracks, poor thing. Mia didn't speak. She just clutched the fox tighter. The man reached for her arm again. Alex didn't move, didn't blink. She doesn't look like she wants to go. Now the man's voice sharpened just a shade. Thank you for keeping an eye on her, Mr. West, Alex replied. That made the man falter again. Brief, barely perceptible. Well, thank you, Mr. West, he said, voice smooth again. I'll make sure she's safe. He tugged gently on Mia's arm. She rose reluctantly, staring back at Alex over her shoulder. Her lips parted one last time. She said you'd come find me, she whispered. And then they disappeared, step by step, down the path between the gravestones. Alex stood rooted in place, breath shallow, fingers cold despite the gloves. Behind him, the grave was still, silent, unchanged, but nothing else in his world was. Alex didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his penthouse, city lights flickering beyond the wall of glass like static on an old television screen. His espresso machine hummed behind him, untouched. On the marble counter sat a half-finished glass of whiskey and the unopened laptop he'd brought home to review quarterly projections. But all he could see behind his eyes, replaying over and over, was the small girl's face at the cemetery. Her tiny voice. That name. Meg. It couldn't be. Megan couldn't have children. They'd tried for years until the diagnosis. Scar tissue, blocked tubes, a quiet consultation in a fertility clinic, where she'd held his hand tightly but never shed a tear. After that, she never brought it up again. So what the hell was a little girl doing by her grave, calling her mom and him dad? By morning, he was already back at Fairview Memorial Park. The air was sharp and wet. The cemetery was nearly deserted, just like the day before. He parked his car and walked the now familiar path to Megan's headstone. The flowers he'd left were still there, lightly dusted with frost. He stood there for a long time, unsure what he expected. A sign? A voice from the beyond? Maybe just some logic to reassert itself. Instead, he heard footsteps behind him. You're back early, a voice said gently. Alex turned. A man in a heavy coat and worn boots approached, leaning on a wooden cane. His gray beard looked like snow-dusted moss, and his eyes were dark but not unkind. Mr. West, right? The man said, extending a gloved hand. I'm Howard, groundskeeper here. Been watching this place longer than I can count. Alex nodded slowly and shook his hand. Howard looked at the grave, then over at the tree where Mia had appeared the day before. You met her, didn't you? The little one. Alex didn't answer right away. You know her? Howard gave a faint, knowing smile. She comes here every Sunday. Same coat, same stuffed animal. Sits on that bench or curls up in the grass. Stares at this stone like it's the only thing that makes sense in her world. Alex swallowed hard. Does she say anything to you? She never talks to me. Won't even look me in the eye. Howard turned to him. But she touches the headstone every time. Places her hand right over Megan's name. Just sits there with her eyes closed. Like she's waiting. Alex felt something twist deep in his chest. Howard hesitated. I asked her name once. She didn't answer, but she left something behind a couple weeks ago. Found it near the vase. Figured someone might come looking eventually. From his coat pocket, Howard pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased, slightly damp. Alex took it slowly. It wasn't paper. It was a photograph. Color, but faded. The edges curled with age. In the photo, Megan sat in a hospital bed, wearing a pale blue gown. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes tired but steady. and in her arms, swaddled in a soft white blanket, was a newborn. Alex's knees went weak. He lowered himself to the cold stone edge of the grave, staring at the photo like it might dissolve. He blinked several times, his mouth dry. Megan, with a baby. He turned the photo over. Someone had written on the back in blue pen, St. Jude Medical, Portland, March 4th, 2019, Mia Megan West. His hand trembled. The date. Megan had told him she was at a writer's retreat that week. She'd even sent a postcard. He'd barely glanced at it. Now the lie hung heavy in his hands. He stood, staring at the grave, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. "Is this real?" he asked, voice hollow. Howard shrugged, but his gaze was serious. "I've buried a lot of people, Mr. West, and I've seen the ones they leave behind. That little girl, she's not confused. She's grieving." Alex looked back down at the photo. His fingers gripped it tighter. "She called me Daddy." "Maybe there's more to your story than you think," Howard said softly. Then he turned and walked away, the crunch of gravel fading behind him. Alex stood there rooted in place. His pulse pounded. His thoughts spun. Logic tried to claw its way back. Megan was infertile. They hadn't spoken much in her final year. She was traveling often. She'd seemed distant. He'd chalked it up to work, to grief, to her own way of coping with loss. But maybe it had been something else entirely. Back in his car, Alex pulled out his phone and opened the map app. St. Jude Medical, Portland, a 4-hour drive. He started the engine. The voice of a little girl echoed in his memory. "She said you'd come find me." This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. And Alex was going to find the truth no matter what it cost. Alex West had walked into hundreds of high-stakes meetings over the course of his career, hostile takeovers, multi-billion-dollar negotiations, courtroom depositions that could crush stock prices. But nothing he'd ever done made him feel as exposed, as uncertain, as walking into the pale green lobby of St. Jude Medical in downtown Portland, carrying a fake identity and a racing heart. He wore a simple gray coat now. No watch, no sleek haircut, no signs of Westlink Technologies. He wasn't a CEO here, just a man named Andrew Blake, a legal assistant conducting genealogical research for a pro bono case. At least that's what the forged university badge in his wallet claimed. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Kelly, looked up with a polite smile. "May I help you?" "Yes," Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm trying to verify a patient record from 2019. Megan, or possibly Margaret Wells. Birth date, January 12th, 1985. I believe she delivered a child here in March of that year." Her fingers paused on the keyboard. She looked up at him. "Are you family?" "No," he said quickly. "This is part of a confidential inheritance search. I'm not looking for medical records, just a basic confirmation of admittance." She hesitated, then leaned back in her chair. "I'll check." The minutes stretched like hours. Alex stood stiffly in front of the check-in counter, every instinct screaming that someone would recognize him, that the glass around him would shatter and he'd be escorted out in handcuffs for fraud. But then a soft voice behind him said, "You're not the first one looking for her." He turned. A woman in light blue scrubs, maybe late 50s, stood just past the hallway, tired eyes, graying curls tucked under a surgical cap. Her ID read, "Dr. Daniels." "She went by Margaret Wells," Dr. Daniels said gently, glancing toward the reception desk. "Come with me." Alex followed her through the corridor to a small office, more storage closet than workspace. Paper files lined the walls, She gestured for him to sit. "I remember her," she said, sitting across from him. "Quiet, kept to herself, gave birth here, March 2019. A little girl." Alex's heart kicked hard. She signed in with no emergency contact, no family, no father's name. Said it was safer that way. Dr. Daniels gave him a searching look. "She had your eyes, by the way. The baby, I mean." Alex blinked. His mouth opened, but no words came. "I asked her once off the record why she was alone," the doctor continued. "She said, he must never know. If he does, she won't be safe." Her voice softened. She seemed terrified, but not of the man you might expect. "Did she mention a name?" Alex asked. "Just H.C." She wouldn't say more, but when she was discharged, she asked for a list of private shelters, not domestic violence ones that stayed off the grid. Alex's voice was barely a whisper. "Bright Horizons?" Dr. Daniels nodded. "That's the one she chose. Told me they had a program for mothers in crisis who didn't want to be found." Alex stared down at his hands. He had always thought Megan's retreat from him in that final year was about grief, about resentment, about a wedge that formed when intimacy failed. But she hadn't pulled away, she had disappeared. Disappeared on purpose. "How did she seem?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Tired, brave, and so very alone." That night, Alex sat in his hotel room, the bedside lamp casting long shadows across a notepad filled with scribbled thoughts. He pulled out the photo again, Megan holding the baby, and traced his finger over the image, as if it might help him understand her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. Then he typed Bright Horizons Portland into the search bar. Their website was glossy and carefully curated, pastel colors, stock images of smiling children, and a mission statement that read like every other charitable shelter he'd ever funded through his foundation. But halfway down the page, a name hit him like a punch to the chest. Executive Director Harold Cray. He stared at the photo. Same man, same smug smile, the one who had taken Mia's hand and walked her away from her mother's grave like he had the right. The next morning, Alex dressed carefully, not in his usual suit, but something neutral. A navy sweater, jeans, clean but unbranded shoes. He adjusted the thin-rimmed glasses he'd borrowed to make himself look more academic. Just another donor vetting a program. Bright Horizons sat at the edge of a residential street, lined with maples and faded duplexes. Its sign was hand-painted, welcoming. Inside, the walls were covered in crayon drawings and affirmations like "every child matters" and "where hope begins." But everything felt too clean, too quiet. A receptionist welcomed him with a warm smile and asked him to wait in the lounge. Minutes later, the door opened and Harold Cray walked in, same gray coat, same polished shoes, same unreadable eyes. "Mr. Blake, was it?" he said smoothly. "Always happy to meet a potential supporter." Alex forced a smile. "Your facility has an impressive reputation." Cray gestured toward the hallway. "Let me give you a quick tour." The building was laid out like a school, but quieter. Too quiet. Children colored in corners, no laughter, no running, just stillness. When they passed one window, Alex paused. Mia sat at a small table inside, coloring. Her hair had been brushed. She wore a yellow jumper and pink socks. Her fox lay beside her. "She's a quiet one," Cray said, his voice almost reverent. "Mother passed. No next of kin. Legally under our care now." "No father?" Alex asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Cray shook his head. "No record of one." They moved on. But inside, Alex was burning. Every step in that hallway felt like walking deeper into a maze made of lies. Before he left, he asked to review the general child intake form. Cray obliged with a charming nod. In the main office, Cray pulled a file from a locked cabinet. Inside was a single document. Guardianship authorization, minor, Mia Megan West, signed by Margaret Wells, date June 11th, 2020, Alex's breath caught. The signature was neat, precise, too precise. Megan's real handwriting had a subtle slant, a softness. This one looked rehearsed, like someone copying a style they barely understood, and the date 3 weeks before her death. She was very clear, Cray said smoothly. She trusted us to take care of the girl. Alex nodded slowly, hiding the rage behind his calm expression. Of course. He thanked him and left. But as soon as he stepped out of the building, his lungs pulled in sharp air like he hadn't breathed in hours. His heart hammered. His brain screamed. That signature wasn't Megan's. Someone had stolen his daughter. And Harold Cray had made it look legal. Alex didn't return to Seattle. He sat in his car in a grocery store parking lot for nearly 2 hours, hands clenched on the steering wheel. The forged guardianship document seared into his memory. The way Cray had handed it over so easily, as if daring him to question it. The way every child in that facility had looked. Not sad, not playful, but practiced. Like silence had been taught to them. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Clara, legal, got your scan. That's not Megan's signature. Her will, medical proxy, and 2 old mortgage forms none match. This one's too perfect. Alex responded with one word. Forge. The reply came seconds later. You need to act fast. If the doc is fake, the guardianship is invalid. But Cray's protected. He's tied to state sponsorship programs. We'll need proof and pressure. He didn't reply. He just stared at the dashboard, at his reflection in the dark screen. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a father. He returned to Bright Horizons that afternoon in a plain hoodie and ball cap. This time, he didn't check in. He parked in the back, walked the perimeter slowly, scanning windows, vents, doors. He wasn't here to rescue her yet, not without a plan. But he had to see her, had to know she was still there. Through a narrow window by the east wing, he spotted her. Mia, alone again, sitting on a rubber mat with a box of crayons. She was coloring a house with no windows. Beside her was that same stuffed fox, ears frayed, fur faded to beige. She looked small, too small for this kind of place, too small for the weight she was clearly carrying. A voice behind him startled him. Mr. West. He turned sharply. Cray stood there, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. I had a feeling you'd be back, Cray said calmly. Alex straightened, heart pounding. She's my daughter. Cray didn't react. That's a bold claim. I have the photo, the timeline. I have Megan's real signature. You don't have custody. There it was. The mask slipped, just slightly. You know that's not her signature, Alex said, voice low. Cray stepped closer, tone clipped. You think because you've got some emotional attachment and a few blurry memories that gives you authority? You walked out on her. You left. And now, when it's convenient, you want in. Alex stepped forward. This isn't about convenience. It's about truth. That girl is mine, and Megan would have never chosen you. Cray's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. Megan isn't here to speak, is she? The words hit like a slap. But before Alex could react, a voice cut through the tension. Mr. Cray? A staff member appeared from the door. The board meeting's about to start. Cray turned without another word and walked back inside. Alex remained still, fists clenched, breath shallow. That night, back at his rental, Alex stared at the ceiling in the dark, images of Mia flashing through his mind. Her tiny voice, her terrified eyes, the way she reached for him with everything but her arms. She knew him. Somehow, she knew. A knock broke the silence. He stood slowly, every nerve buzzing. At the door lay a sealed envelope, no return address, no markings, just resting there like it had been delivered by wind. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside, folded carefully, was a certified copy of a birth certificate. His eyes scanned the page. Name of child, Mia Megan West, date of birth, March 4th, 2019. Mother's name, Megan Elaine West. Father's name, Alexander James West. His knees buckled. He sank onto the floor. The world stopped moving. There it was, black ink on ivory paper. No more doubt. No more questions. Mia was his daughter. Megan had named him. Despite everything, despite the distance, the silence, the lies she told to protect that truth, she'd never erased him. She had written his name down when it mattered most. Alex pressed the page to his chest, forehead resting on his fists. For a long time, he didn't move. When he finally stood, the tremble in his hands was gone. The hesitation in his heart was gone too. He wasn't asking for permission anymore. He was going to protect his daughter. No matter what it took, the snow had started to fall again. Soft, slow flakes drifting across the windshield of Alex's rental car as he crossed state lines, heading east on Route 84 with no press team, no assistant, no bodyguard. Just him, a thermos of bitter coffee, and the folded birth certificate tucked safely inside the inside pocket of his coat, pressed close to his chest, like a relic. He had sent a scanned copy to his legal team, and another to Clara with a note that read only, "Begin." But this wasn't a business play. There were no quarterly reports or talking points, no metrics to track. Just one goal: find Mia, protect her, bring her home. Hours passed like minutes. He barely noticed the green exit signs flashing past. Somewhere after Pendleton, the sun dipped low and he turned off onto a county road, rougher, narrower, flanked by trees coated in ice. As the silence thickened, a memory began to stir. Not just a memory, the memory. It was a rainy night. 3 years ago. He had come home late from a conference in San Jose. Megan was at the kitchen table, a red folder open in front of her. Ultrasound paperwork, fertility treatments, notes scribbled in her looping handwriting. He had stared at the folder, then at her, and said, "Meg, we talked about this. The odds." She looked up, her eyes glossy, voice flat. "I know what the odds are. I read the same reports you did." He sighed, already loosening his tie. "It's not fair to either of us. Why keep chasing something we can't have?" Megan had stared at him then, for a long time. "What if I'm not chasing it for us anymore?" He hadn't understood. Not then. And when she said nothing else, just stood up, quietly closed the folder, and walked past him into the bedroom, he let her go. That was the night she started pulling away, and he let her. Back in the present, Alex parked along a quiet curb outside a gated facility called Glen Hill Residential Care, a private center CRE used for child stability transfers. It looked more like a renovated convent than a care home. Modest brick building, small windows, one security camera. Through the glass of the main entrance, Alex caught a glimpse of a figure sitting in the common area. A little girl, her legs tucked beneath her, coloring quietly at a round table. The fox doll beside her. Mia. His throat tightened. She was here. A staff member stepped through the side door to collect a delivery. Alex approached casually, making small talk about the weather, the coffee shop across the street, the facility's architecture. The woman smiled politely and eventually stepped away, leaving the door propped open. Just for a second. Long enough. He entered through the side, down a hallway that smelled like sanitizer and faded paint. He kept his head down, moving quietly until he reached the glass partition that separated visitors from the playroom. There she was. He didn't knock, didn't wave, just stood there. Mia didn't notice him at first. She was focused, crayon in hand, drawing a crooked house with a cloud above it. Then, slowly, her eyes flicked up. They met his. She didn't smile, didn't gasp. She just stared long and steady. Recognition. Trust. Behind her, in the mirrored glass of the observation office, Alex saw him. Harold Cray. Watching. Not moving. Just watching. Alex stepped back. He didn't run. He walked out the same way he came in. Later that night, back at his hotel room, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the room key in his palm like it meant something, like it was supposed to unlock more than a door. When dawn finally broke, he drove out toward the outskirts of the city. He stopped at a small diner and asked for a booth in the back. The waitress brought him coffee without a word. He pulled out the drawing Mia had left behind in the hallway window slit of Bright Horizons. He'd found it tucked just behind the curtain after she disappeared. He hadn't looked at the back. Now he did. In messy block letters, written in pencil, it read, "Help me. He says if I run again, I disappear." Alex's breath caught. The paper trembled in his fingers. He sat there in the booth for a long time, the coffee going cold. Then he folded the note, placed it back into the envelope with the birth certificate, and took out his phone. One name. One number. Isla Monroe, investigative journalist. He texted, "I have a story, a real one, about kids who disappear quietly, and one little girl who won't." He pressed send. This wasn't just about one child anymore. It was about all of them. The night was windless. No sirens, no traffic. Just the faint rustle of dried leaves as Alex crouched behind a tall row of hedges near the back of Bright Horizons. The cold pressed through his jacket, but he didn't flinch. His breath came slow, measured. Every step from this point forward had to be perfect. He checked his watch. 2:10 a.m. shift change. 2 guards on rotation, one of them barely awake during rounds, the other stationed up front. The rear building records and administration would be unstaffed. Lights out, cameras panning at fixed intervals. He knew. He had mapped the system himself 2 nights ago, from the corner of a nearby rooftop using a drone and infrared. Once, long ago, before Westlink became a tech empire, Alex had written code to bypass early biometric scanners just for sport. Now he was using old instincts not to win a contract, but to save a child. His child. He slipped through the service gate, picking the outdated padlock with a custom wire tool. Inside the utility corridor, the air was warm, dry, and utterly still. He moved quietly down the hallway, keeping to the shadows, timing his steps with the lazy arc of the hallway camera. He reached the records door in under 30 seconds. Old mechanical keypad, 8 digits. He pulled out a red filter flashlight and scanned for oil smudges. 4 numbers showed heavier wear. 2, 4, 6, 9. He ran permutations in his head. 2649, 4926, 9624, third try, click. He was in. The room smelled of old paper and laminate plastic. File drawers stretched across every wall. Not digital, not secure. Just names, dates, labels, lives. He scanned until he found it. Drawer OR-C42, he pulled it open. Mia Megan West. He flipped through the folder quickly. A copy of the fake guardianship form. A typed psychiatric report labeling Megan as emotionally unstable and unfit for continued care. A child behavior assessment entirely fabricated stating Mia exhibits signs of prolonged neglect. None of it signed by licensed professionals. No doctor's seal. No hospital logo. Just official-looking headers and bold words meant to intimidate. Then came the final page. Placement recommendation. Section 11F. Transfer to Morocco. International humanitarian coordination approved. Alex felt his stomach drop. They weren't just housing children. They were exporting them. He looked back at the drawer label. OR-C42. The one for Mia, but next to it. Drawer XFAM, he pulled it open. Dozens of files, all different names, ages 3 to 9, parent status, deceased or unknown. Guardianship, Cray or one of his assistants. At the bottom of each file, transfer destination, Czech Republic, El Salvador, Tunisia stamped with logos from obscure NGOs that barely existed outside letterheads. No court documents, no caseworkers, no biological family check, just signed waivers and fast-track approvals. A silent trafficking machine disguised as kindness. Alex snapped photos of everything, full-page shots, signatures, logos, dates. He scanned a QR timestamp with his camera app, embedding metadata into each image. Then, just as he closed the final drawer, a sound, a footstep. He froze. Light flicked on in the hallway. A shadow passed the glass. Alex slid into a storage closet, breath held, hand pressed to the wall. The handle jiggled, then quiet, then retreating steps. He waited 30 seconds before easing out, glancing both ways. Clear. He retraced his path, careful, methodical. Out the same service door, past the herb garden, over the gate. Only when his boots hit asphalt did he exhale. Back in his car, he uploaded every image to 3 secure cloud servers. One to Clara's legal database, one to an encrypted journalist vault Isla had given him, and one to a private FBI tip line. He sent a message to Ayla. Tonight, the truth walked out with me. You ready to tell it? By noon the next day, her article was everywhere. Orphans for Export, the hidden network behind Bright Horizons. The front page of 3 major news sites. Over 200,000 shares in 4 hours. Screenshots of forged documents, Mia's altered records, and the forged power of attorney circled in red. An attached video showed Alex's time-stamped body cam footage and metadata-stamped file photos. Hashtags trended instantly. #, Mia West, #, not for sale, #, bright horrors. An official investigation was opened by Oregon State Child Services before the news cycle hit 5 p.m. Cray released a statement. Vague denials, claims of fabrication, and emotionally manipulative accusations. But public pressure was mounting. Fast. That evening, Alex returned to his penthouse in Seattle for the first time in days. The place felt different now, like someone else had lived there, like everything that once mattered. Stock options, quarterly growth, prestige was part of a life that no longer fit. He stood in the kitchen, staring at a cold kettle when the doorbell rang. His heart skipped. No one should have known he was back. He approached slowly, cautiously, and opened the door. There in the hallway light stood Mia, soaked to the bone, clutching her fox doll, hair sticking to her forehead, her shoes dripping onto the marble floor. Behind her, no one. She looked up at him. "He said," she whispered, voice shaking. "He said if I ever ran again, you'd know what to do." Then she collapsed forward. Alex caught her before she hit the ground. He scooped her into his arms, held her against his chest. She was trembling but warm, real, alive. He closed the door with his foot, heart pounding in his chest. She was home. And now, nothing, not forged papers. Not Cray, not the state was going to take her away again. Alex sat motionless in the waiting room of the Multnomah County Courthouse, his hands folded tightly in his lap, suit perfectly pressed but hollow beneath the surface. It had been 6 days since Mia collapsed into his arms, rain-soaked and shivering, whispering the words that rewrote the rest of his life. Now came the battle to keep her. Across the hall, behind 2 sets of frosted doors and a courtroom number etched in brass, the case of Alexander James West versus Harold Cray was about to be heard. The charge: unlawful custody, document forgery, and systemic abuse of guardianship. Clara sat beside Alex, her heels tapping softly against the tiled floor. Her briefcase was full affidavits, signatures, forensic handwriting reports, internal child welfare correspondence. All of it weaponized for one thing: proving Alex was not just the biological father, but the rightful guardian. Cray had arrived 10 minutes earlier in a sharp blue suit, flanked by 2 attorneys and a PR manager. He smiled for the reporters as if this were just another minor scandal he would eventually swat away. Inside the courtroom, the air was cold, sharp. The judge, a woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor, began the hearing with a single sentence: "Let's deal with facts, not fear." The opening salvos were tense. Cray's lawyer painted Alex as a wealthy opportunist with a savior complex. He disappeared from the mother's life, had no contact with the child, and only reappeared when it served his conscience, the attorney declared. Alex didn't flinch, but his fists clenched under the table. Clara stood calmly when it was her turn. "My client is not here for redemption. He is here because the mother of his child, who listed him as father on the birth certificate, was deceived, and that deception was weaponized to steal their daughter. We are not arguing potential. We are arguing proof." And then came the evidence. The forged power of attorney. The metadata from Alex's body cam footage showing the drawer Cray had never declared. The expert witness, a handwriting analyst, who testified with 99% certainty that Megan's signature had been forged. Then came Ayla. She testified calmly, firmly, describing the documents Alex had shared, the files with transfer destinations, the silent corridors filled with sedated children. Her voice never wavered. She ended with a simple sentence that echoed in the room: "No one who hides children on paper can be trusted to care for them in person." But it was Dr. Carol Daniels who changed everything. The judge leaned forward when Dr. Daniels took the stand. Her credentials were pristine and her memory flawless. "I was there the day Megan West delivered her baby. I watched her cradle Mia. I asked why she hadn't listed a father. She said, 'He let me go so I could heal. But I'm naming him on the birth certificate anyway, because no matter what, Mia deserves to know she was wanted.'" A quiet gasp moved through the courtroom. Cray's lawyer tried to discredit her, but it was too late. The judge called a recess. Outside the courtroom, Alex found Mia sitting cross-legged in a small conference room, coloring. Her fox doll sat beside her on the table. She looked up as he entered. "Are we leaving again?" she asked softly. "Not yet," Alex said, kneeling beside her. "But soon." She looked back down at her drawing, a sun, a lake, a man with messy hair holding hands with a girl in a yellow dress. "That's us," she whispered. "At Mommy's house." He blinked. "You remember that place?" She nodded. She said the lake made the stars feel closer. Alex felt something shift in his chest. That night, back in Seattle, he began preparations. Mia's room was first. He repainted it himself. Sky blue walls, white trim. He ordered shelves for her books, hung up paper stars from the ceiling, and left a nightlight in the shape of a fox glowing softly by the bed. He learned how to make her favorite breakfast waffles with strawberries shaped like hearts. He read every page of her medical file, scheduled appointments with specialists, and arranged trauma-informed therapy sessions. He also revisited the lake house Megan had left behind, a forgotten property she had never sold. Hidden among pines, the house still echoed her in the way the floor creaked, the faint scent of lavender on the windowsills. He restored it carefully, sanding the porch railing with his own hands, replacing the broken wind chimes, scrubbing every surface as if he were scrubbing guilt from his soul. One evening, as they sat on the living room floor folding laundry, Mia held up a pink sock and asked, "Are you going to leave too?" Alex paused. He turned to her slowly, then gathered her into his lap, holding her gently from behind. "No," he said quietly. "Not in this lifetime, sweetheart." She leaned back against his chest and exhaled, the way children do when they believe you. And for the first time, Alex knew he was exactly where he needed to be. Spring came early to Oregon that year. The trees bloomed slowly, cautiously, as if still unsure the cold had really passed. But on the edge of a quiet lake, tucked behind a grove of pines, the old West family cabin had come back to life. Windows thrown open, curtains dancing in the breeze, the sound of soft laughter drifting through the screen door like music. Mia ran barefoot through the backyard, a crown of dandelions on her head and a popsicle in her hand. Her giggle echoed out over the water as Alex tried to chase her, one hand shielding his eyes from the sun, the other waving a towel like a flag of surrender. "I'm too old for this," he called out, breathless. She turned, grinning. "You're not old. You're just big." He laughed. It wasn't a sound he'd made in years. Not like that. Not from the belly. Not without reserve. Later, they sat on the dock together. Her head on his shoulder, her legs dangling over the edge, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. Mia reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded paper. "I made something," she said, handing it to him. He opened it slowly. A drawing, simple, colorful, full of life. 3 stick figures stood beneath a bright yellow sun. One tall man in blue with a crooked smile, a little girl with a crown of flowers, and beside them, a woman in a green dress drawn with stars in her hair. Above the picture, in purple crayon, "Mommy, me, Daddy." Alex didn't speak. His throat thickened too fast. "I know she's not here," Mia whispered, eyes still on the water. "But I think maybe she can still see us." He nodded, pulling her gently into his side. "I think so too." That weekend, they drove to Fairview Memorial Park with a bouquet of wildflowers Mia had picked herself. She skipped down the stone path, careful not to crush the petals, her stuffed fox under one arm. Megan's grave was clean, the grass freshly trimmed. The engraving hadn't changed, but the silence around it had. Mia knelt down and placed the flowers carefully. "We brought her home," she said, her voice light but certain. Alex stood behind her, hands in his pockets, blinking up at the sky. "I hope you're proud," he murmured. "She's everything good you ever were." At home, their refrigerator held two photos side by side. One of Megan laughing in a sunlit field, hair wind-tossed, eyes full of fire, and one of Alex and Mia on the courthouse steps, her front teeth missing, his tie crooked, both of them beaming like the world had finally tilted back into place. The house had changed. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. The once empty shelves now held Mia's drawings, storybooks, a clay fox she'd made in art class. Her tiny shoes lined the hallway, her laughter filled the mornings, and her sleepy footsteps echoed down the hallway every night. Some nights, she still woke up from bad dreams, sweating, wide-eyed, silent. Alex would always be there within seconds. He never asked what the dream was about. He never told her to be brave. He just held her hand and whispered, "I'm here. You're safe. Go back to sleep, sunshine." And she always did. He learned to braid her hair messily at first, too tight or too lopsided. She giggled every time. He packed her lunches with little notes scribbled on napkins. Sometimes they just said, "You got this." Other times, "Waffles tonight?" He stopped answering work calls after 5. He stopped checking headlines at breakfast. He started spending his weekends building a swing set in the backyard and reading bedtime stories twice, even if she asked for the long ones. And each time she peeked under the covers to make sure he hadn't left. He never had. Because he'd promised. Not just in court, not just to Megan, but to Mia. One night, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink across the lake, Mia turned to him and said, "Do you think the stars are doors?" He looked down at her, surprised. "Doors?" "Yeah, like, maybe Mommy walks through them sometimes, to check on us." He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pulling her close. If anyone could, it'd be her. She nodded, satisfied, and leaned against him. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then, in a soft, sleepy voice, she whispered, "She said you'd come find me." Alex turned, his voice low, steady, "And I always will." The wind rustled the trees. The fox lay curled beside her feet. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere far above, the stars blinked on. And their home, though, stitched from sorrow, second chances, and quiet courage, finally felt whole. Alex and Mia's journey is a beautiful testament to how even the most profound losses can lead to new beginnings, and how love, in its purest form, can heal even the deepest wounds. It's a reminder that every day holds the promise of a fresh start. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more uplifting narratives that celebrate the power of the human spirit. And don't forget to hit that like button to help us share these meaningful stories with a wider audience. We'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, what's a moment in your life where forgiveness or a second chance brought unexpected joy? Share your wisdom with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.